What's going on, my friends? Chris Peach here, episode 134 of the Money Peach podcast. And today on the show, a little bit different format. We're not doing a how to, get out of debt, how to do a credit score, how to invest. It's kind of an overall piece about personal finance that's really near and dear to my heart. And that is talking about the Christian principles when it comes to managing money. Yes, you heard that right. We're going to be talking a little bit about God and money today. And to do that, I thought I need to find the absolute master, like the founder of the person out there who's consistently for 15 years been talking about money and God and how that works together. And that's Bob Lotich from seedtime.com. So Bob, thanks so much for coming on the show, my friend.
Thanks, Chris. I am glad to be here, and I like talking about this. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and I'm glad we get to chat about it. I think it's gonna be fun.
So before we jump in, I think a lot of times when people, it's funny, and you and I have talked about this, but when people sometimes find out about your faith or find out that, oh, this guy likes to talk about God and money, they're almost like a little too scared because you're so different in a way, right? Because I think a lot of times we know a lot of people who are believers, but they're a little shy against talking about this. It's almost like a voodoo topic, and it doesn't have to be. And so I will just say this so our listeners, understand that, Bob and I have had a beer together. All right. We're normal guys. We love God, but we also love talking about money. Yeah. And so it's not like if you're watching this right now and you're thinking, oh my gosh, they're going to start, thumping me over the face with the Bible. That's not what this is about. It's talking about the Christian principles as they pertain to finances. And then something that, if you want to talk about, putting your money where your mouth is, something that Bob did that he shared with me last year it just blew my mind. And I thought I have to have him come on the show and share that. But Bob, before we jump into your story, what we're going to talk about during this episode is just give us a little background of who you are, the financial world that you come from, and kind of your journey from where you started to Seed Time.
Yeah. So let me start by saying I love talking about this because I'm just fascinated that the Bible actually has pertinent, relevant information for us still today. So these principles are timeless and they're universal. And so they apply. So even to somebody who's not a believer, they still apply and you can still benefit from them. Just like gravity affects all of us, it's no different. Like anyone can benefit from these principles. And that's what I just love talking about. So to my story a little bit and how we got into this whole thing, I had worked in the banking financial space, for many years and thought that I was really good with money, just like most people do. There have been surveys that have been done that show that like 85% of Americans think that they're actually really good with money. You know as well as I do, there's definitely not 85% of Americans who are actually good with money. And so I was naive and thought that I was really good with money until I found myself basically penniless, broken down on the side of the road in a town where I didn't know anyone, had no one to call, at my breaking point moment and realized, all right, Lord, I need help. I don't know as much as I think I know about money. And that was kind of like my point of realizing, okay, and humbling myself a little bit and realizing I need to move forward. I need God's help. And so from that point, he just began to lead me down a journey and showing me things in the Bible, like what the Bible said about money, and then everything else. I was reading every book, every magazine. There weren't really many blogs at the time, but I was reading some of them. No podcasts yet. I'm dating myself here, but
what year are we talking here? We like
2002 at this point. 2001.
So this is the dinosaur of the blogging world.
There might have been some blogs out there. Yeah, something like that. So that's how I kind of got started on this whole path. And in 2007, a few years later, as I was still on my journey learning, and just becoming more and more fascinated, reading through the book of Proverbs and seeing all that had to say about money and all of these kind of timeless truths, a lot of which Warren Buffett operates with. So if you need like a real life example of somebody who's not a believer, but who is benefiting from a lot of these principles, like Warren Buffett is one of those guys, and not all, but some. And so anyway, in 2007, I just began to want to start sharing some of what I was learning because I was so fascinated with it and didn't even know what a blog was at the time, but I decided I wanted to create a website. Talked to a friend of mine. He's like, oh, that's a blog. I was like, okay, great. So I started my first blog sharing all these ideas, and then the rest is history. That's where we are.
Okay. So you started off, you were christianpf.com, and then
Correct.
You moved into Seed Time. And so I just out of curiosity, I think a lot of us are wondering, what does Seed Time mean? How did you name your site Seed Time? Where does that come from?
So it's from a Bible verse, Genesis 8:22. It says that there will always be seed time and harvest. And I became fascinated as I started looking at how God does things in our lives, like any progress that he makes in our lives. It always starts with something small. Like almost everything that you find God doing that ends up really big always starts really, really small. And the reason we named the site this is because this is how I see financial change happening in my life and how I've noticed it happen in all of our readers and all of our audience in their lives. And so I just wanted to kind of focus on this idea that the power of this whole thing is planting the seed. If you don't plant the seed, if you don't take that first little step and then just continue to water it, like you're not going to see the harvest. You're not going to see the 50-foot tall oak tree, because so many people dismiss the potential of a seed because they just want the 50-foot oak tree to appear overnight. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But the power is in planting that little seed, taking that first step to get out of debt, taking that first step to start your budget, whatever that thing may be for you, and actually just continuing to nurture that thing and watch it grow. And it grows a whole lot faster than you think. And it ends up yielding so much more fruit than you can imagine once you get a little bit further down the line. So that's why we named it what we did and what I've been really excited about.
And I love that. So I think everybody that's listening or watching this can apply that. Like, think about a time in your life where it seemed like you had this, like this giant idea, or maybe this mountain to climb. I'll give you an example. I remember when I was thinking about becoming a firefighter, and I would go to the fire station and I would just see these big trucks and the captain and the engineer, and I'd see all these things, aspects of the fire department. I thought, I wasn't a firefighter. I just was dreaming about becoming one. I remember thinking this would be so amazing. And then it seems like in a blink of an eye, I'm now the captain on the fire truck. And I see the new guy coming in, like he's brand new, or the guy coming in who's aspiring to be a firefighter. And I think, wow, the journey that God took me through to get here was amazing. And at the beginning of the journey, it seemed like it was the impossible, right? It was this tiny little seed. Yep. And then I look back and it's this huge oak tree of this journey that I've had in the fire service. And it really, like you said, I could not believe how fast it's already happened. It's like, oh my gosh, my career is closer to the end than it is at the beginning. It's just so bizarre to me. And we could apply that to any aspect, whether it's your career, money, marriage, kids, anything. So I love the idea of seed time. I knew that already, but I wanted to share that with the audience because I had to ask you too a couple months back, like, what does that mean? So thanks for sharing that. All right. So the main reason why I wanted to do this today is I was in Nashville back in August with a group of guys. And so they said, do you know Bob? And I'm like, well, yeah. And they're like, he's going to be our guest speaker today. I'm like, Bob's our guest speaker? Awesome. So Bob came in, we were in this mastermind group, and Bob comes in and he shares this story that, like, all of us had our jaw dropped. Like, oh my gosh, like, it's so crazy. I'm like, who does this? Bob does this. And so Bob, let's just, instead of building this up anymore, let's just talk about it. Okay. Let's just talk about it. So we're going to talk about how you took a sabbatical, but kind of tell us what was going on in your life and what that looked like and how this all came to be.
Yeah. So 2016 was a really busy year for me with the business. We were moving in a lot of different directions and I was working like crazy. Okay. So by the end of the year, I'm really burnt out. And like I said, we started kind of our blog, which became my full-time job in 2008. So since that point, the 8 years there, I enjoyed every day of going to work. I absolutely loved it. At the end of 2016, it was the first time that I ever remember waking up on a Monday and being like, oh, and having that feeling of having a job that you don't like. Mm-hmm. And once I realized that, I'm like, all right, this is not good. Like, the whole reason I started a business was to be able to do work that I loved and I enjoyed and I felt fulfilled and called to do. And I'm now finding myself in a position where I don't want to get up and do my work. So that's just not a good situation to be in. And so at that point, I realized, all right, I need a break. And so we were planning a sabbatical for about another month and a half out. And it was a tough month because I was so worn down. But anyway, we get to February and we're taking a month-long sabbatical. And we had already done this before. And so, I know some people are like, well, that's the miracle in itself. That's crazy because it's just not possible for a lot of people. And that's fine. We can get to that in a minute. But it was something that we were going to do. And so we went down to near you, actually. We went down to Scottsdale, Arizona. And we took a month there in February, which is beautiful, by the way. Anybody doesn't know, it's like 75 and sunny the entire month. Mm-hmm. And so we spent a month down there. And normally, whenever I take even a week or two off, I just get so refreshed at the end of really 2 weeks. I'm itching to get back to work. I have so many ideas. I'm so refreshed. I'm overflowing just with ideas and things I want to do and accomplish and whatever. So long story short, we get to the end of this month-long period. We're driving back to Nashville. And I just don't feel any better. I feel just as burned out and drained. And so we get back home and I tell Linda, my wife, like, I just still don't feel refreshed, and we had, a couple little kids and maybe that was part of it. I don't really know. It makes no sense. And anyway, long story short, I take another week off and I'm sitting in my office. I was renting an office at the time and I was kind of looking at my whiteboard where I had monthly goals I was checking off. And for February, the goal was sabbatical. And I was looking at it, I'm like, I don't know if I spelled that right. I don't spell sabbatical very often. And so I Googled it to see what it was. And as I'm Googling it, this Wikipedia entry comes up. And so I just clicked on it and started reading. And as I'm reading, this like line kind of jumps off the page to me. And basically it says like, essentially, technically a sabbatical is a 1 year thing, like the true definition of sabbatical. And as I saw that, I'm like, it just like jumped off the page. I'm like, that's interesting. I didn't think that much of it at the time, but then I continued to read this Wikipedia entry and it was just like God was speaking to me through this thing. It was just like, I could tell this was for me. And I began reading about how in Leviticus 25, so this chapter in Leviticus where it talks about how God tells the Israelites to, after working the land for 6 years, to let the land rest for the seventh year. And we all know now, like agriculturally, if you continue to plant the same crops in the same land over and over and over again, the soil becomes depleted and the crops don't bear a good fruit. Like the land needs to rest and you need to have that and you need to have crop rotation, like this science has proved this. But this is what the Bible said, thousands and thousands of years ago, is that the land needs to rest. And so for some reason, God was taking me through this journey using this analogy down this path. And when I look back at that 2016, if there was anything I felt like, it was completely depleted. And so it just all began to click and make sense. And so anyway, as I started praying about this a little bit more, I'm like, I think this is maybe what I'm supposed to do. It's like kind of scary and terrifying. And I went
kind of scary. Kind of scary. You just took a month off, then plus another week. And now all of a sudden, because like literally, as somebody listening and watching this, they're probably thinking, so he Googled the word sabbatical and all of a sudden now he's ready to take a year off. Like, no,
yes, I'm trying to make this as quick of a story as possible. There's a lot more in between here, but anyway, I go and talk to Linda about it, and I'm thinking that she's
Linda is, by the way, his wife, his amazing wife.
Yeah. So I'm thinking she's going to think I'm crazy. Like I don't want to do this. And as I go to her, because like this is just part of being Christian and walking with God. Like the way I've never heard God talk audibly to me. I've never had that, but there's this little thing deep down inside where I can just sense that he's trying to communicate something to me, and the longer you're a Christian, the more you can better get a sense for that. And so anyway, so I've felt this feeling before, and so I go to her and I tell her, I'm thinking about something that I think the Lord might be leading us to do. And as soon as I tell it to her, she's like, yeah, I already knew. And she had already had a heads up like a week earlier, but she didn't tell me because she felt like she was supposed to wait on telling me until I got it. It just felt like confirmation. So like God kind of communicated this to both of us individually, separately. And so like once I heard that, I'm like, okay, all right. And so then the reality sets in of what does this mean? Like, how do I possibly do this? How do I step away from my business for a year and have one when I get back? Like, how do I feed my family for the entire year? How do I, whatever, any of this stuff? And there's a million and one questions that all come up. And another interesting thing, if you go back to the Leviticus 25 chapter that I'm talking to you about here, the Israelites asked the same question. They said, God, what are we supposed to do if we don't plant in the seventh year? And God says, well, in the sixth year, I'm going to provide you an abundance that's going to cover you through the seventh year and the eighth year. So that you have enough to kind of ride through until you can plant and harvest again. And what was really fascinating was that the previous year was such a big year that we had built our savings up enough to actually ride us through that. Now, that wasn't my intention for that savings. Like that wasn't my plan to do that. But the reality is that that's what God had done for us. And I just didn't realize it yet. So that's the gist of how we got there. And yeah, I can go into more on how we were wrestling and all that, but you tell me where to go from here.
Okay. So, I mean, just kind of sum this up real quick. You take a month off, you go to beautiful Scottsdale. By the way, if anybody listening has not been to Scottsdale it hasn't been to Arizona in the month of February. Yeah. Best month to go. Okay.
Completely agree.
So you go and you spend a month of just amazing weather, relaxation. And usually you're rejuvenated, you're ready to rock. You come back, you're still not ready. And so you decide, long story short, I'm going to take a year off. Okay. The crazy thing to me is when we were talking about this, I was at a business mastermind. And so we were there to talk about business, not the entire time, but the majority of it was business talk. And so you have a business that just had a killer year, right? Was it your best year?
It wasn't our best year, but it was still a really good year.
You have a good year.
I wasn't ready to take off. Like I didn't want to do this. Like I tend towards workaholism. Like this is not something that I wanted to do. This was definitely an act of obedience for me.
Yeah, I feel like to me, the thing that just blew my mind is, when you have that good year, you just feel like, oh my gosh, I got to keep going. I got to keep going. I don't want to slow down that flywheel spinning, right? I don't want to slow it down. I don't want to stop it, and you're not slowing it down. You're like, okay, I'm not going to come to work for a year. So what is the next step then when you decide that, hey, I'm done. I'm going to take a year off. Like, what do you do? Because that's my biggest fear about retirement. You meet so many people who retire and, there's a lot of firefighters out there that I know that retire and they're like, I don't know what to do. And they end up going to get hired back at a small fire department or, they just go work some kind of job as a paramedic, like, at the fair or at a Cardinals game or something like that. They're just, I got to do something. And so that's another challenge too, is not just taking a year off, is what do you do in that year?
Yeah. So that was a question I was definitely asking too. I mean, I was a little bit more concerned with feeding my family than figuring that out, but that was a question I had. And so another interesting thing I'll add to this story, just kind of all of these pieces just tied together just as a confirmation of I wasn't crazy and I was doing what I was supposed to do. So at the beginning of the year on January 1st, we had reached out to an adoption agency looking to adopt our second child. Mm-hmm. And that agency, we specifically went with them because they were very streamlined and had a really good placement rate. Like everything about them was very, very organized. And the way that they worked was they said, we will connect you with the birth mother who is typically 3 to 4 months pregnant. So you will have about 5 to 6 month heads up to get mm-hmm. ready for the baby to be born and to go through that whole process. And that's their standard procedure. And they are very cookie cutter and they just bring them in and like, they just have a system that they do. And it's, just very consistent. So January goes by, we didn't hear anything. February goes by, we didn't hear anything. Like March goes by, we haven't heard anything from them at all. Like honestly, it just kind of like drifts out of your mind a little bit because you're just not hearing anything. It's like, I don't know if anything's happening. Anyway, so literally 5 or 6 weeks after I had finally decided that we're going to do this thing and we're going to take this time off, we're going to take this entire year off, we got a call from the agency saying we have a little bit of a special situation here. It's not like how we typically operate, but we have a birth mother who actually gave birth last night and she has just selected your profile. And so Lynn and I, like our jaws dropped, like we were so unprepared for this. Like we had gotten rid of all of our baby clothes because we gave them to like her sister or something when she had a new baby. We gotten rid of our car seat because we assumed we would have a 6-month kind of window to get ready for all this stuff. So anyway, so long story short, we immediately hop in the car and drive down to Alabama to pick up our baby girl. And, we're just completely ill-prepared. And for anybody who doesn't know, interstate adoptions, like you need to be, when you do that, you need to be prepared to be in that state for up to 14 days because you can't leave the state until the courts approve it. So you have to live out of a hotel room with a newborn and then another 3-year-old we had at the time. Like, so it's just a crazy, crazy time. And I have no idea how that would have worked out if all of my plans that I had for the year and really for those couple months, it would have been an absolute mess. And then the other beautiful thing is I just got to spend that first year of life with her, just spend so much time with our new baby girl that it's just precious, precious time that I will forever be thankful for. So that was how we spent a lot of the time. But so getting to spend that time with, our new baby girl and our 3-year-old, like those are memories I'll never forget and I'll cherish forever. And then besides that, like I really enjoy being outside. I enjoy doing real work, if we will. Not all this keyboard typing stuff that I do most times.
Mm-hmm.
And so I spend a lot of time outside doing landscaping and building a good garden and just getting dirty. It just felt really good.
What I take away from that story right there is, you didn't have a plan. You were just kind of open, walking out on faith. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Right. Because it wasn't like you were taking time off a year to prepare for the adoption. You already made the decision. And then that came along. And that's the whole point, I think, that we have that I still struggle with and I need to work hard on is two things. Two big takeaways from your story for me are, faith is not knowing and letting and putting your life in his hands. Your life is in his hands already. So it's actually just saying, I'm going to put my life in your hands.
Acknowledging it. Yeah.
Acknowledging it. Yeah. And number two is, and I think this is important, is we live in a this for that culture, a this for that world, right? Think about it. If I work really, really, really hard at work, good things will probably happen. If I do this, that will happen, right? I think what we think of, and this is me saying this, maybe people agree with me, maybe they don't. I think one of the problems I have is, God, I'm going to do what I think you want me to do. Therefore, I want my life to be easier. So we do these things and then life gets harder. And you're like, no, this wasn't the plan. I was doing this for you, God. I was doing this so you would make my life easier. And he makes it harder. And sometimes I think we wrestle with that going, man, I've done everything you've asked me to do. And now my life is actually more difficult than when it was before. And you start second guessing yourself. But I have a mentor that I talk with and a faith mentor. And I remember he said one of the things, he goes, tell me anywhere in scripture where it says God's going to make your life easy. I'm like, no, I say that, So I just think it's incredible that, you had this business that was doing well. And, the normal, the most common feeling would be, let's keep going. And then you said, no, we're going to go down this route of not knowing, go on faith, wonder how I'm going to feed my kids and my family. And then as soon as that happens, and it's like, oh, and by the way, now your adoption's here. And you just went with it. And that's why when you were telling the story, I think all of us, there was like 6 of us there, our jaws were dropped because I was like, man, like there's people out there that say they have faith. And then there's people out there that actually, they practice what they preach. And that's what I respect and I love about you is like, my goodness, you have to, like, it worked out. And I think God doesn't want you to fail, right? He wants it to work out for you if you trust him. But I'm like, you just had to really open your arms and say, all right, what do you want? What do you need and want me to do? And I just think like, wow, and money touches every aspect of our lives. And if that we know that's true, then money also touches your spiritual aspect as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was a journey, man. Like, no doubt. I mean, and we've been through these things. We've just had enough of these things that, I'm just kind of sold out to it. Like, I just know that when God calls me to something that it's going to work out. And it's taken a while to get there. And I still have moments where I'm doubting, we're going through stuff now that like, I'll give you a testimony, hopefully in a couple months or whatever. And at the moment, like, I can have moments of doubt, but if I really step back and I really look at the big picture, everything he's done, it's like, I know that he's going to work it out, and to the point that you're mentioning about everything getting better. Like, that was the interesting thing for me. Like, during this entire year, I got the impression that everybody thought, wow, you're taking an entire year off because God told you to. Like, God's going to do something miraculous. Like, Jesus is going to show up in your bedroom. Like, he's going to tell you what to do with the rest of your life and all this stuff. And secretly, I'm hoping, I hope he does. That'll be really cool. But none of that happened. And to be honest, like, as the whole year, I'm sitting here waiting for direction from God. Like, give me this big revelation, 10 commandments type thing. And I'm just not really getting anything. And it wasn't really until the very end of the year, just got a little hint of some direction that I felt like might be significant, even though it didn't feel really, really heavy. And then as we got into that next year after we're done, I'm just thinking, kind of like how you mentioned, all right, God, well, I did my thing. Now do yours. Like, pour out all the blessing. Let's go. And actually the next year was actually a struggle. Like it continued to be a struggle. And that was a little bit challenging and humbling because like you said, it's like you think that as soon as you do what God wants you to do, everything's going to work out. Now, ultimately, I do believe, and I feel like I've noticed this, that eventually it does. This is just like pruning a tree.
Mm-hmm.
You prune a tree, it looks pretty weird. You just chopped off so much of the growth, but ultimately it causes you to bear more fruit. And this is the way that I do believe this works. But sometimes it takes a while for that fruit to increase. You don't see these harvests overnight or anything like that. So yeah.
I love it. And I think I love how you said that too, is, pruning a tree. I remember I heard this example. I've shared this a couple times on the podcast. So for those of you who are avid listeners, thank you for listening, but you're going to hear the same thing again. But a couple months ago, just having some personal struggles and just trying to figure out what do you want me to do, God? What is it? And so I went on a hike. I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to the CrossFit gym today. I just need to be alone. I'm going to go on a hike. And I go on this hike, and here in Phoenix, we have mountains all around us so we can hike. So I was hiking this mountain that I've never hiked before. And I get to the top, and it's probably like February or March. It's beautiful. And I'm feeling the wind against me, and it feels so good. And I'm listening to a podcast that somebody had recommended to me the day before. And it's about a preacher. He's in North Carolina, and he has his own podcast, Elevation Church. If you haven't heard it, it's awesome. And I'm listening to this podcast, and it wasn't even him. It was a guest speaker on the podcast. Go figure. And so he goes, I remember this guy goes, have you ever been to the top of a mountain? And I'm looking around. I'm like, yeah, I'm here right now. So I'm thinking, God's talking to me. God's talking to me. And he's like, you ever been to the top of a mountain? He goes, what do you see? So I'm looking around and I see, we're up pretty high. I see houses and neighborhoods and freeways and roads. And he's like, you see dirt. I'm like, no, I don't. I'm like, oh, at my feet. So I look down at my feet and he's like, you see dirt. He's like, you see dirt and you see rock, but you don't see anything green. You don't see any vegetation. You don't see any fruit. And he goes, you got to go down to the valleys to get the vegetation and to get the fruit. And he's like, and that's how life works. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm in a valley right now. And in the past, I started realizing when Andrea and I went completely broke, that was a rough time in our life. It was horrible. Yeah. I mean, it was embarrassing. It was shameful. I mean, our marriage was in the rocks. We were in a valley. And then that's where we grew to come out. And then we've had our moments of peaks. Peaks are small moments, right?
Yeah.
For a reason, because we got to go back down to the valley. And so whenever I feel like life is difficult or life is hard, I got to remind myself that where I'm at is where I grow. That's where the fruit is. It's in the valleys. It's not at the peak. And so I always try to keep that in mind. And I remember just thinking, perfect. I say, hey, nice work, God. Perfect timing there. I'm at the top of a mountain. And the guy goes, have you been to the top of a mountain? I think so. I think there's moments that we need to look for in life. And it's so easy to look for why is this happening to me? When really it could be, why is it happening for me?
Yeah, that's so good. And that's so true. Those are absolutely the opportunities for us to grow is in those moments. And it's really hard because it's easy to feel like a victim and to turn yourself into, just inwardly focused and just focus on that. But yeah, those are the huge opportunities for us to grow. So really good.
Bob, people wanted to find out more about you. One thing that I'm really excited about you have as a free resource is you have Prayer Tied with Money. It's a free resource that people can download. Where can they grab that?
Yeah, it's seedtime.com/prayers. So seedtime is in, seedtime.com.
Okay, so I have it pulled up on the screen right here. So if you guys are watching, you guys will see it right here on the screen. I'll give you 1 second. Here it is. So it's seedtime.com/prayers.
And so basically we put together a PDF of a bunch of Bible verses about money and about God providing for us. And these are Bible verses that we have stood on and just clung to in some of our tight financial seasons. And then we also have a handful of prayers in there that are just good prayers to be praying for your financial life. If you need to move forward financially, if you're struggling, they'll just help you with any of that.
Awesome. I love it. All right, my friend. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're wrapping up here at the end. And I just want to thank you personally. From me to you is I was kind of behind the scenes here, but for the longest time, I was afraid to talk about two things as a quote unquote personal finance lover of personal finance, which I am. I love talking about, the budgets, the savings. Two things I was afraid to talk about is one, I never wanted to tell anybody I was a firefighter because I felt like if somebody thought you were a firefighter, then you wouldn't be qualified to ever talk about money. And then I started realizing, but everybody deals with money, whether you're a plumber, a firefighter, a cop, So I got rid of that. And one of the big things is I was like, you know what? I want to reach as many people as possible. And I know if I talk about God, that could push people away. And I thought, you know what? That's me thinking that. I felt like one of the callings I had is, I want to tell people that it's okay to talk about money and to talk about God. Yeah. And so I appreciate you kind of helping me with that, because we've had these conversations of like, how do I go in that direction? And so I just thank you for that on a personal note. And thanks so much for coming on the show. And if you guys haven't yet, head on over to seedtime.com, or you can go to moneypeach.com / session 134, moneypeach.com / session 134. And those links will be up soon, and they'll take you to everything we talked about in this episode, including that resource Bob has with the prayer and money. Bob, man, appreciate you coming on. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate you, brother. Thanks.